if it wasn't for my parents and the example that they set for me, I wouldn't be here tonight. My dad is still with us. He's 81 years old. He lives down at the Jersey Shore now. Is a frequent attendee to my town hall meetings. I think just because he knows I'll introduce him. And he loves to take pictures with people afterwards. It's a great thing for him. And the attribute that I think contributes the most to my ability to have some success at this, that he passed on to me, was hard work. My father was always, and still is today, an enormously hard worker. He was the one who used to tell me all the time that there was no substitute for hard work. And his work ethic goes all the way back to being a kid who grew up in Newark and then went to high school in Hillside and worked. And his father passed away when he was 17 years old. And he was a high honor student at Hillside High School and wasn't able to go to college because his father had passed away and he needed to go to work to help support his mom and his two younger siblings. He joined the Army and prepared to go to Korea. Came home and worked at the Breyers ice cream plant in Newark and thought that this was going to be the greatest job he'd ever have in his life. He's like, you know, the work's not that hard. I get paid pretty well. And they send you home with ice cream. Like really good ice cream. It's a great job. And he worked as a young man. He was 23, 24 years old, just out of the Army. And he worked next to a much older guy. And the guy, when he would chat, they worked on the line together. And he kept saying to my father, what are you going to do with your life? My father said, well, I like this job. It's close to home, you know, pays pretty good, hours are good. And he kept saying to my dad, you know, you need to go to college. You know, you're a veteran, you have the GI Bill available to you. You should go to college at night. And finally, he literally brought my father down to Rutgers at Newark and said, you have to get the information and think about this. And so he did. And my father ultimately enrolled at Rutgers at Newark and went to school for 7 years at night while he worked at that ice cream plant during the day. And in that period of time, met my mom and got married. And my mother used to tell me all the time that their first family picture was my mother and father on his graduation day at Rutgers in June of 1962. And it was my father and my mother 6 months pregnant with me. And she called it the first family picture. And when I remember that picture, it's this enormous look of pride on both their faces at what they had worked to do together. And my father worked like that for the rest of his life until he retired. He led us by example. And so that part of my leadership style of kind of being relentless and just working and working and working an issue until I got at or near where I wanted to comes from him. And so when I was thinking about the Father's Day Award today and this, it's got a lot to do with the example my dad set for me. Of course, the other side of my leadership style, which I think they said in the video, he's a different kind of leader. It's nice. That means my people put it together. That comes from my mother. The outspoken, direct, no-nonsense part comes from my mother. And I'll tell you 2 stories about her that will make you completely understand that what I'm telling you is true, and she is just as large a part of me being up here tonight and being governor as my dad. One of them, they're both true stories. One of them involves Senator Torricelli, who's here tonight. He liked to tell this story at times. He liked to tease me about it. Senator Torricelli was our United States Senator at the time I was nominated to be U.S. Attorney by President Bush, and he was instrumental in my nomination being successfully confirmed by the United States Senate. And thereafter, you have an investiture ceremony where everyone gets together in one of the grand courthouses, and the U.S. Attorney is sworn in, and people who are involved with making that happen speak. And Senator Torricelli was there that day, and remember now, I was nominated to be U.S. Attorney in New Jersey on September 10th, 2001. And ultimately was sworn in January of 2002. And so Senator Torricelli was there that day, and he spoke, as he always does, extraordinarily eloquently off of an index card with a couple of words on it about the challenge of being U.S. Attorney in the aftermath of 9/11 and what his expectations were of me in this incredibly challenging and historic time in our country's history. And it was really an extraordinarily moving set of remarks. And I sat my mother next to Senator Torricelli at that event, and I didn't know this story. It was months later that the senator I went down to visit, I was in Washington, and he told me the story. He said that he sat next to my mother, and then after he was done, he sat down, and that my mother turned to him and said, "Those were wonderful remarks, Senator, really wonderful things you said, and wonderful things you said about my son." Senator was in the midst of considering running for re-election that year, and he said, "Well, thank you very much." And you know, like any politician would do, he kind of turned to her and said, "So, do I have your vote?" My mother looked at him and said, "Don't get carried away." Now, he told me this story in his Senate office in Washington. So I got on the train to head home mortified. I mean, this guy, I would not have been confirmed as U.S. Attorney without Bob Torricelli. And so I get on the phone, I call my mother from the train. I said, "Mom, I'm on my way back up from Washington." I said, "Just met with Senator Torricelli." She goes, "Oh, he's a nice man." And I said, "Yeah, but he told me this story, and I'm sure he's making it up. He's got to be making it up." And I repeat the story to her. I said, "That can't possibly be true, can it?" And she goes, "Oh, yeah, that's true." I said, "Mom, this is the guy who made me U.S. Attorney with the president. How could you say that to him?" She goes, "Chris, I'm a Republican. He should have known better." So that's part of my bluntness and my directness comes from someone who would sit next to the guy who just helped to make you U.S. Attorney and say, "Yeah, good chance, not voting for you." The second part of the story is that this past, about a month ago today, actually. A month ago today, my mother passed away 10 years ago. And it was a pretty sudden illness. She was pretty healthy and was diagnosed with lung cancer on Valentine's Day of 2004. And by early part of May, she was at the end of her life. And I was away at a U.S. Attorney's conference in San Diego. And she was put back in the hospital, and my brother called me and he said, "Listen, they're starting to give her morphine. It's bad, and any of you who've gone through this know what that's like." He said, "So if you really want to see her again, you need to get home now." So I got on the red-eye flight from San Diego that night, flew back, landed at Newark Airport the next morning at about 8 a.m. And I got in the car and went to St. Barnabas Medical Center where she was hospitalized. And got up to her room, and she was kind of in and out of things, sleeping a bit. And I sat next to the bed, was holding her hand, and she finally woke up. And she didn't say hello or anything. She hadn't seen me for days. She looked at me, she goes, "What day is it?" I said, "It's Friday." And she said, "What time is it?" I said, "It's about 9:30 in the morning." And she said, "Go to work." And I said, "Mom, I decided to take the day off. I'm going to spend the day with you, so I'm not going to work." And she said, "Christopher, it is a work day. Go to work." I looked at her, I was U.S. Attorney at the time. I looked at her, I said, "You know, like, not worried about not getting your taxpayers' money's worth today? Like, don't worry about it. I'll make up the time. I'm going to stay here with you." And she kind of rolled over a bit, and she grabbed my other hand with her hand, and she said, "Christopher, go to work. It's where you belong. There's nothing left unsaid between us." She was giving me permission to let her go. And the fact that she could look at me and say there was nothing left unsaid between us was true because that's the way she taught me to be. She used to say to me all the time, if I've got a problem, you're going to hear about it. I don't keep things on my chest. I get them off, and I get them off immediately. And that's the way you need to be. She said, in a trusting, loving relationship, Chris, you need to let people know what you think. She used to tease me all the time, there'll be no deathbed confessions from me. You're hearing it now. And as it turned out, she was right. Because at that moment, when I was at her deathbed, she was able to look at me and smile and say, there's nothing left unsaid between us. So the two parts of my leadership style that I think are indispensable, it struck me today, came from the two of them. My father's enormous work ethic and my mother's extraordinary, bordering on annoying candor. And the two of them gave me the best of both of them. And so I know that if my mom were still here and were able to see this circus that my life has become, that she would remind me every day that I'm governor, Chris, these people who elected you twice now gave you the greatest vote of trust and confidence that they can give to anybody. They gave you the most important job in the state they have to give. And what you owe them in response every day is your honesty, to be candid and direct with them. And so I know that if she were still around and she were here tonight, she'd be enormously proud, obviously. She would tease me unmercifully about how completely undeserved this is. She would tell me that if, in fact, there were any merit to this selection, that it would be because I followed her advice. And that I've told people the truth as I see it, whether they agree with it or they don't. And all the things that have happened to me in my life, especially of late, that have been good and rewarding and a bit overwhelming, like tonight, are a result of those traits that my mother and father gave to me. And so I think it's really fitting that if I were going to get these two honors, that they happen in the same day. That I'm reminded acutely that the leadership skills that I have and am able to try to use every day are a direct result of the extraordinary parents that I'm lucky enough to have. And so it gives you two great reminders. First is that whatever you accomplish in your life is always not just a product of yourself, but of who you are and where you've come from. And secondly, that you have an obligation to pass that on. What the foundation does is pass on these things through the great works that they do. And as governor, I have an obligation to try to pass these things on in my public life, but even more importantly, with two boys and two girls at home, 20 and 18, 13 and 10, I have an obligation to make sure that those great things that my parents passed on to me and anything else that I picked up along the way myself, that I have an obligation to pass it on to them. And today has been an acute reminder of that for me. And so thanks for being a part of a very unusual but happy day in my life. To be honored today as a parent that I hope my parents would be proud of, and then to be honored tonight as a leader that I know my parents created. And that's a pretty good day by anybody's standard, even if you're governor of New Jersey. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the work of the foundation. For so many of you out there, thank you for being my friend, because there are a lot of really good friends out in this audience tonight. And that's something that people in politics say all the time. My good friend this, my good friend that. You know, we kind of, it's more part of the training school, you know, that we go to. But I can tell you that tonight, this isn't a political speech, as I'm sure you've probably already been able to tell. The people out here tonight who are my friends know who they are, and have stood by me both in joyous times and in difficult ones, and have reached out to me to give me words of encouragement when things were going great, and words of encouragement when things were not going so well. For all of you out there who are my friends, please understand that whatever honors I receive, part of them belong to you, in a similar way that they belong to my parents, because you're indispensable to my life, and many of you who are indispensable to my life are here tonight, and I appreciate that friendship and want to thank you as well. So thanks to the foundation for this honor. Thank you to all of you for coming here tonight and supporting me and supporting the work of the foundation that's so important and so worthwhile. And finally, thank you for giving me a moment in my life that I am confident, ring or not, I'd never forget. So thank you all very, very much. I appreciate it.